Hi everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Anna. Today I have a new story for you. The words are simple, and this story is good for beginners. The story is called The Community Choir. It's about a woman who always thought she couldn't sing, until she decided to try anyway. Let's start. Nancy Wheeler was 42 years old. She worked at a small bakery in her town, waking up early every morning to make bread and pastries for customers. She liked her job, but her life felt a little quiet. Her children were grown up now and lived in other cities. Her husband worked long hours. Most evenings, Nancy sat alone watching television, feeling a little bit lonely, though she rarely said this out loud to anyone. She sometimes thought about how different her evenings used to feel when her children still lived at home, the house full of noise, homework arguments, and dinner conversations. Now the house felt quiet in a way she hadn't fully expected, and though she loved her husband dearly, his long working hours meant many evenings passed with just Nancy, the television, and her own thoughts for company. Nancy had always loved music. She sang along to the radio in her car, in the shower, and while baking bread early in the morning. But she never sang in front of other people. As a child, a music teacher had once told her, quite unkindly, that she wasn't very musical, and Nancy had believed this for her entire life since that day. One afternoon, walking home from work, Nancy saw a small poster on a community center window. It said, "New singers wanted. Community choir. No experience needed. Everyone welcome." Below the words was a picture of happy people singing together. Nancy stood there for a long moment, staring at the poster. Part of her wanted to walk inside immediately and sign up. Another part of her remembered that old music teacher's unkind words, and she almost walked away. But something made her stay. Maybe it was the quiet evenings alone. Maybe it was simply feeling tired of avoiding something she genuinely loved. She took a photo of the poster with her phone and walked home, thinking about it the entire way. That evening, she showed the photo to her husband, Tom. "I saw this today," she said. "A community choir. I think I might want to try it." Tom looked surprised, then smiled. "You always sing while you're cooking," he said. "I think that's a wonderful idea." "But what if I'm terrible?" Nancy asked, feeling nervous just talking about it. "Then you'll be a terrible singer having fun with other people," Tom said, laughing gently. "That sounds better than not trying at all." The next morning, Nancy called the community center number listed on the poster. A friendly voice answered, a woman named Carol, who explained that rehearsals happened every Tuesday evening, and new members could simply show up, no audition needed. "Everyone is welcome," Carol said warmly. "We have singers from complete beginners to people who sang professionally years ago. Nobody will judge you." Despite this reassurance, Nancy felt extremely nervous walking into the community center the following Tuesday evening. She had changed her clothes 3 times before leaving the house, unsure what to wear to something she had never done before, eventually settling on simple, comfortable clothing after reminding herself this was choir practice, not a job interview. She stood outside the door for almost 5 minutes before finally gathering her courage and walking inside. Inside, about 20 people stood in a semicircle, chatting happily while they waited for rehearsal to begin. Folding chairs lined the walls, sheet music stacked neatly on a small table near the piano, and the room smelled faintly of coffee from a small table where someone had set out cups and a pot for anyone who wanted one before rehearsal began. A woman with gray hair and kind eyes noticed Nancy standing uncertainly near the door and walked over immediately. "You must be new," the woman said, smiling. "I'm Carol, we spoke on the phone." "Welcome. Come stand with the altos, over here. Don't worry about anything tonight. Just listen and follow along." Nancy joined the group of women labeled altos, standing nervously between two friendly-looking women who introduced themselves as Susan and Patricia. Both women had been singing in the choir for several years and immediately made Nancy feel welcome, sharing their sheet music and quietly helping her follow along during the first song. The choir director, a tall, energetic man named Mr. Davies, led the group through several warm-up exercises before starting on an actual song. Nancy felt her voice shaking nervously during the first few notes, embarrassed by how quiet and uncertain she sounded compared to the confident voices around her. "Don't worry about being perfect tonight," Susan whispered kindly during a short break. Everyone sounded exactly like that during their first rehearsal, including me, years ago. By the end of the first rehearsal, though her voice remained quiet and uncertain, Nancy felt something unexpected, genuine happiness. Singing together with other people, even imperfectly, felt completely different from singing alone in her kitchen. There was something powerful about many voices blending together, creating something bigger than any single person could create alone. "Will you come back next week?" Carol asked as Nancy prepared to leave. "Yes," Nancy said, surprising herself with how quickly and confidently she answered. "Definitely." During her second rehearsal, feeling slightly more comfortable than her nervous first evening, Nancy accidentally sang an entire verse one full measure ahead of everyone else, her voice suddenly standing out alone before she quickly realized her mistake and stopped, blushing deeply with embarrassment. Rather than laughing unkindly, several nearby singers simply smiled warmly, and Susan gently squeezed her arm. "That happens to everyone eventually," Susan whispered. "Consider it your official welcome into the choir." This small, kind moment helped Nancy relax considerably, understanding that mistakes here were treated with warmth rather than judgment, quite different from her painful childhood memory involving that unkind music teacher. Over the following weeks, Nancy attended every Tuesday rehearsal without missing a single session. Slowly, her confidence grew alongside her singing ability. Susan and Patricia became genuine friends, often chatting with Nancy during breaks about their families, their weeks, and their shared love of music. The two women also invited Nancy to join them for coffee after rehearsal one evening, at a small cafe near the community center. Sitting together over warm drinks, Nancy learned that Susan had joined the choir after her own children left home, feeling a similar quiet loneliness Nancy currently recognized in herself, while Patricia had simply always loved singing and finally found time for it after retiring from her nursing career the previous year. "I actually cried during my first week too," Susan admitted, laughing softly at the memory. "Not from sadness exactly, just from how good it felt to sing with other people again after so many years alone in my empty house." Patricia nodded in agreement. "Choir gave me a reason to leave the house on Tuesday evenings," she said. "After 30 years of night shifts at the hospital, I honestly didn't know what to do with my evenings anymore. This filled that gap perfectly." Nancy found herself sharing her own quiet loneliness more openly than she had with almost anyone else recently, grateful to discover she wasn't the only person who had found herself drawn to the choir partly out of a need for genuine connection, not just a love of music. "We were all a little nervous once," Patricia told her, smiling warmly. "It gets easier every single week, I promise." During the third week, Mr. Davies announced something that made Nancy's stomach tighten with nervousness. The choir would be performing a holiday concert in 3 months, open to the entire community, held at the town's largest church. "A concert?" Nancy said quietly to Susan afterward. "In front of actual people watching?" "It's wonderful, honestly," Susan reassured her. "The whole town comes. It's one of my favorite nights of the year." Nancy felt genuinely torn. Part of her desperately wanted to quit before the concert, remaining safely anonymous rather than risking public embarrassment. But another part of her, the part that had already grown stronger over the past few weeks, wanted to push through this fear, just as she had pushed through her fear of walking through that door on her very first Tuesday evening. She decided to stay, though her nervousness about the upcoming concert lingered constantly in the back of her mind throughout the following weeks of rehearsal. During the 6th week, the choir faced their first real challenge. Mr. Davies introduced a particularly difficult new song, full of complicated harmonies that required each voice section to sing something slightly different, all blending together into something considerably more complex than anything they had attempted previously. Nancy struggled badly with this new song, her voice repeatedly wandering into the wrong notes, confused by the unfamiliar harmony. During one particularly frustrating rehearsal, she felt genuinely embarrassed, certain everyone around her could hear her obvious mistakes. She noticed other altos around her seemed to grasp the tricky harmony far more quickly, their voices confidently finding the correct notes while Nancy's own voice repeatedly drifted toward the more familiar melodies sung by the sopranos beside them. "I don't think I can do this part," Nancy admitted quietly to Mr. Davies during a break, feeling discouraged. Mr. Davies, patient and encouraging, sat down at the piano and played her specific vocal line slowly, several times, helping her understand exactly how her part fit within the larger harmony. "This is genuinely one of our hardest songs," he reassured her. "Nobody learns it perfectly during the first few attempts. Give it more time." Encouraged by his patience, Nancy practiced her difficult part at home during the following week, playing a recording Mr. Davies had shared repeatedly while cooking dinner, cleaning the house, even during her morning drive to work. Slowly, gradually, the confusing harmony began making sense, her voice finding its correct place within the overall sound. By the 8th week, Nancy successfully sang through the entire difficult song without any major mistakes, feeling an overwhelming sense of accomplishment afterward. Mr. Davies stopped the rehearsal briefly just to acknowledge her improvement in front of the whole group. "Listen to that alto section now," he said, smiling at Nancy specifically. "2 weeks ago, this exact song had several of you completely lost. Now listen to how solid it sounds." "You've really improved," Patricia told her during a break that same evening. "I remember how nervous you looked during your very first rehearsal. You seem like a completely different person now." "I feel like a completely different person too," Nancy admitted, genuinely surprised by how true this felt. "I never expected singing with strangers could change so much about how I feel generally, not just about music." Around the 10th week, With the concert only a month away, Nancy experienced another significant challenge. She caught a bad cold, losing her voice almost completely for nearly 10 days. Unable to attend rehearsals or practice properly, Nancy worried constantly that she would fall dangerously behind the rest of the choir before the important concert. Lying in bed feeling miserable, unable to even speak clearly let alone sing, Nancy found herself missing rehearsal more than she expected, texting Susan repeatedly for updates on what she was missing each Tuesday evening. Susan sent back detailed voice recordings of new sections whenever possible, along with encouraging messages reminding Nancy to focus on resting properly rather than worrying about the choir. "What if I'm not ready in time?" Nancy asked Tom anxiously one evening, her voice still slightly hoarse from her lingering cold. "You've worked incredibly hard for months," Tom reminded her gently. "A few missed rehearsals won't undo everything you've already learned." When Nancy finally returned to rehearsal, still slightly worried about her missed practice time, Susan and Patricia immediately helped her catch up, patiently reviewing the sections she had missed during her illness. Mr. Davies also offered additional encouragement, reassuring her that her previous months of consistent, dedicated practice had built a solid foundation that wouldn't simply disappear after a short illness. "You've put in the work already," Mr. Davies told her kindly. "Trust what you've already learned." As the concert date rapidly approached, rehearsals became noticeably longer and more intense, the choir practicing not just individual songs but the entire concert program in proper sequence, including where everyone would stand, when they would move, and how the evening would flow from beginning to end. Mr. Davies also arranged a special final rehearsal inside the actual church itself, allowing everyone to practice within the real performance space, getting comfortable with its different acoustics and layout before the actual concert night. Standing inside the large, echoing church for the first time, Nancy felt her nervousness spike considerably, the empty rows of seats seeming to stretch endlessly before her, each one destined to be filled with watching faces during the real performance. Her own voice sounded strange to her ears in this new space, the tall stone walls carrying sound in ways completely different from their usual rehearsal room at the community center. "It feels different in here," Nancy admitted to Susan during a break in that final rehearsal. "It always does," Susan said. "But trust me, once the seats are actually full of familiar, friendly faces, it feels warmer, not scarier." Frank, an older member of the tenor section standing nearby, overheard their conversation and added his own reassurance. "I've sung in this church for 11 years now," he said, smiling kindly. "That echo you're hearing becomes your best friend once the room fills up with people. Trust the process." The night before the concert, Nancy could barely sleep, her mind constantly replaying different sections of music, worrying about forgetting her words or singing the wrong notes in front of the entire watching community. She thought about that unkind music teacher from her childhood, wondering if this anxious feeling would ever completely disappear. Concert day finally arrived, cold and clear, with light snow falling gently outside as families began arriving at the church that evening. Nancy stood backstage with Susan and Patricia, wearing the simple dark outfit Mr. Davies had requested from everyone, her hands trembling slightly with nervous energy. Peeking briefly through a small gap in the curtain, Nancy saw the church filling steadily with people, children in their best clothes, grandparents finding seats near the front, and a general warm, festive atmosphere despite the cold weather outside. String lights decorated the walls, and the smell of pine branches used for holiday decoration filled the entire building. "Look for one friendly face in the crowd," Susan advised her quietly, just before they walked out. "Focus on them if you feel nervous. It helps, I promise." Walking out to stand with the rest of the choir, Nancy immediately spotted Tom sitting in the third row, smiling proudly, along with several other familiar faces from her neighborhood who had come specifically to support the community choir. The concert began with several simpler songs, Nancy's confidence growing steadily with each successful piece. When the difficult harmony song finally arrived, the one that had once caused her so much frustration and doubt, Nancy took a deep breath, found Tom's supportive smile in the crowd, and sang her part clearly and confidently, her voice blending smoothly with the surrounding voices around her. As the final notes faded and the church fell briefly silent before erupting into warm, enthusiastic applause, Nancy felt tears unexpectedly filling her eyes, an overwhelming mixture of relief, pride, and genuine joy. After the concert, Tom found her immediately, embracing her warmly. "You were wonderful," he said, genuine emotion evident in his voice. "I could actually hear your voice clearly during that difficult song. You should be so proud of yourself." "I can't believe I actually did it," Nancy said, still slightly in shock, wiping happy tears from her cheeks. Susan and Patricia joined them moments later, both hugging Nancy warmly. "Look at you now," Patricia said, laughing with genuine affection. The nervous woman who could barely whisper her notes during that first rehearsal months ago. "I couldn't have done any of this without both of you," Nancy admitted honestly. "Thank you for being so patient with me from the very beginning." The community gathered afterward for a small reception in the church hall, warm drinks and homemade cookies shared among performers and audience members alike. Several neighbors Nancy barely knew before that evening approached her specifically, complimenting her singing and asking curiously how long she had been part of the choir, genuinely surprised to learn this had been her very first concert. "You looked so natural up there," one neighbor told her. "I never would have guessed you were nervous at all." Even Nancy's own boss from the bakery attended the concert, having heard Nancy mention it during their morning shifts together over the preceding weeks. "I had no idea you had such a lovely voice," her boss said, genuinely surprised, hugging Nancy warmly amid the crowded reception hall. "You've been hiding quite a talent all these years, baking bread beside me every morning." Nancy laughed, feeling genuinely happy hearing this unexpected compliment from someone who had known her for years without ever knowing this particular part of her. In the months following the successful concert, Nancy continued attending the community choir every single Tuesday evening, her confidence and singing ability continuing to develop steadily. She no longer felt the same overwhelming nervousness before performances, though a small, healthy amount of nervous excitement always remained, something Mr. Davies assured her was completely normal, even among the choir's most experienced singers. Nancy also found herself singing more freely at home now, no longer confining her voice to only the shower or the kitchen while nobody was listening. She sometimes practiced with the windows open, unbothered by the possibility that a passing neighbor might overhear. Her husband Tom noticed this change too, mentioning one evening how nice it was hearing her sing confidently throughout the house again, something he admitted he hadn't fully realized he missed until it returned. Even her relationship with her own grown children shifted slightly, Nancy calling them excitedly after each rehearsal to share small updates about her progress, something that gave them a new, lighter topic to bond over during their regular phone calls, quite different from their usual conversations about work and daily responsibilities. The following year, when new members joined the choir for the very first time, Nancy found herself specifically seeking out the most nervous-looking newcomers, offering the exact same warm welcome and patient encouragement Susan and Patricia had once offered her. "Everyone starts exactly where you are right now," Nancy told one particularly nervous new singer, a young woman who reminded Nancy vividly of her own uncertain first evening. "Don't worry about being perfect. Just keep showing up, and trust me, everything else follows naturally." Reflecting occasionally on her remarkable journey, Nancy often thought back to that old, unkind music teacher from her childhood, and to that pivotal afternoon walking home from the bakery, staring uncertainly at a simple poster in a community center window. She sometimes wondered whatever happened to that teacher, wondering if she would recognize the confident woman Nancy had slowly become, so different from the frightened 10-year-old who once believed a single unkind comment about her voice forever. She felt genuinely grateful she had finally decided to walk through that door, discovering not just a renewed love for singing, but genuine friendship, unexpected confidence, and a meaningful new community she now couldn't imagine her life without. And that's the end of today's story, The Community Choir. I hope you enjoyed it. I think this story shows something nice. Sometimes the things people told us long ago, even unkind things, don't have to stay true forever, if we're brave enough to try again. Before you go, think about this. Has anyone ever told you that you couldn't do something? Did you believe them, or did you eventually try anyway? Thank you so much for listening today. This has been Anna, and this is the podcast. See you in the next episode. Take care, and keep practicing your English.